I bought a bicycle. It's been like 30 years since last time I rode a bike. I had my own bike. I used to go everywhere with my bike, like it was in elementary school. I used to go shopping. I used to do everything with my bike. But it's been 30 years since the last time I owned a bike. Now, I see things differently. Different from when I walk, different from when I drive. I never noticed there are lots of glasses actually on the road. So the first time I rode this bike, I got a flat tire. That was a bummer. Here's the children's center at my campus. Someone's doing some woodwork here. I'm sort of new to this area, so we just moved in August last year. It's been like 10 months. It's been so far so good, but I'm still learning. Well, let's take this steep up the hill. That's a hard one. And you know, you see things differently when you are pushing hard. I bet it's different. The world is different when I come back. I had to get off. Now I'm walking. When I got my driving license, my dad told me besides driving laws, there are also ethics. I asked what? He said the rider should salute the walker. We actually have an idiom in Persian that could be translated as the one who rides is unaware of the barefoot, and the fool is not aware of the hungry. Back on the right. Whew. These are redwoods. Some of them are as old as few thousand years old. It makes me feel young. Oh, maybe not as young. You know, sometimes you are just riding your bike or walking on the sidewalk, thinking about maybe a school assignment, maybe your rent, maybe some outstanding bill that you have to pay. Maybe you just argued with your partner, or your kids are giving you a hard time. Oh. And then a car just goes by, someone rolls down the window and calls you like cutie or terrorist or you gotta go, and all of a sudden you become self-aware, too aware of yourself, of your identity, of your body, of your gender, of your race, and so many different things. I told you, life is much easier when you go down the hills. Here's a little stop sign, and then we go this way. So, from where do you see the world? Are you on your bike, or you are walking, or you are just riding, driving your nice vehicle with some AC on? Did you have food, or your blood sugar is too low? Is it windy or it's humid? Are you tired? Did you sleep well? So all these things make you see the world differently, let alone your values, your beliefs. Hello, my name is Ruhollah Aghasaleh. I'm an assistant professor here at the School of Education at Humboldt State University from beautiful Arcata. I would like to acknowledge that we are on the land of Viet people, which includes the Viet tribe, Bear River Rancheria, and Blue Lake Rancheria. Arcata is known as Gudini, meaning over the woods or among the woods. Viet people continue to remain in relationship to these lands through ceremony, culture, and stewardship. They are important part of not only the history of this area, but also in continuing knowledge of this place. Justice-oriented pedagogies are well implemented and well established in educational theory and practice. Informed by Marxist and critical theory of post-World War era, Paulo Freire wrote his famous Pedagogy of the Oppressed in 1968, translated into English in 1970, where he introduced concepts such as oppression, banking, praxis, and conscientization. Later in 1989, Banks and Banks wrote about multicultural education. Sonia Nieto also in 1992 expanded this idea. They introduced concepts such as content integration, multicultural education as basic, as process, and multicultural education for all. In 1994, Gloria Ladson-Billings introduced culturally relevant pedagogy, a pedagogy that empowers students intellectually, socially, emotionally, and politically by using cultural and historical reference to convey knowledge, to impart skills, and to change attitudes. She also coined the idea of dream keepers for educators. Cultural responsive pedagogy, as the use of cultural knowledge, prior experiences, frames of reference, and performance style of ethnically diverse students to make learning encounters more relevant to and effective for them, was also coined by Geneva Gay in the 2000s. More recently, our culturally and linguistically responsiveness, introduced by Holly in 2012, which emphasizes on validate, affirm, build, and bridge. Also, cultural sustaining pedagogy, coined by Paris and Alim in 2014, emphasizes on ideas such as cultural pluralism, humanity, identity, history, language, family, and community. Although the feminist scholar Kimberly Crenshaw wrote about intersectionality in the 80s, the idea that we cannot understand oppression in one dimension, we cannot understand race, we cannot analyze racial injustice without addressing and without understanding gender oppression, sexual orientation oppression, and other forms of oppression. The justice-oriented pedagogies that, as I explained, started later, they were very limited, at least in the United States, to the issues of race, which is of course an important aspect of identity, an important aspect of oppression in this society. Later, in the 21st century, Gloria Ladson-Billings in 2014, Sonia Nieto in 2012, and Kevin Kumashiro wrote about anti-oppressive and more intersectional ways to make education more accessible and justice-oriented. However, the mainstream justice-oriented still is focusing on how we teach. There is less discussion and less interest about what we teach, and also where does that knowledge come from. In other words, in this very standard and standardized education that we have in this country. Most of justice-oriented educators tend to insert some culture into education, as they cannot really manipulate the content knowledge. That is like we have to teach some content and we cannot deviate from those contents. And we are limited on epistemological level and ontological level. And we can just play and manipulate the instructional methods. That is what Latson-Billings and Nieto are critical, as they talk insertion of culture into education as opposed to insertion of education into culture. But wait, in science teaching, we are just teaching facts. We are just teaching objective realities. We are just teaching about truth. The truth has been generated through what we call scientific method. So why do we need to turn around and round and round and think about where did this knowledge come from? Why do we need to worry about these things? We can just teach about reproduction. We can teach about gravity. We can teach about environment. All these things are just scientific facts, scientific facts, scientific facts, scientific facts. This is what my daughter wrote about her name, which is actually incorrect according to Western calendar and according to American curriculum. But basically what she was referring to as the first season was that in our calendar, in Iranian calendar, spring is the beginning of the year. Actually, spring equinox is the new year. And she was referring to spring as the first season of the year. Take a look at this picture. Apparently, if you use Viagra, your ejaculation will be so powerful that you will shoot a sperm into space to aggressively penetrate planet egg. Emily Martin wrote this article in 1991, The Egg and the Sperm, How Science Has Constructed a Romance Based on Stereotypical Male-Female Roles. She looks at science textbooks, biology textbooks on college level, where there is this idea of sperm as agential and eggs as passive. The same gender roles that the society and the culture perpetuates. In science teaching and in science exploration, we are also thinking within those grids of intelligibility. That is, we are bound with our ontologies. We are bound with the ways that we see the world. We are bound to our perception about being, about knowledge, about human, about nature, and about relationships. As philosophers of science moved away from representation and epistemology, a new issue came into prominence: ontology. The researcher must declare ontological and epistemological positions as foundational to the questions about research methodology. Even if these positions were undeclared, they would be implicit rather than explicit. However, these onto-epistemological foundations are deeply grounded in the researcher's beliefs about the world. Remember what I shared with you on my bike? How I would see the world differently when I was riding my bike than when I was walking or when I was driving? Ontology is the theory of nature of being, becoming, existence, and reality. It concerns the question of how the world is built. Is there a real world out there that is independent of our knowledge of it? What, if any, are the basic categories of being, and how are relations between those categories? Epistemology is the philosophy of the nature of knowledge. It questions what knowledge is and how it can be acquired. who can have or produce knowledge. Epistemology is also concerned with the knowing and the noun, and how knowledge is generated.
You were on your way home when you died. It was a car accident. Nothing particularly remarkable, but fatal nonetheless. It was a painless death. The medics tried their best to save you, but to no avail. Your body was so utterly shattered, you were better off, trust me. And that's when you met me. What happened? Where am I? You died, I said, matter-of-factly. No point in mincing words. There was a truck, and it was skidding. Yes. I died. Yes. But don't feel bad about it. Everyone dies. You looked around. There was nothingness. Just you and me. What is this place? Is this the afterlife? More or less. Are you God? Yes, I'm God. My kids? My wife? What about them? Will they be all right? That's what I like to see, I said. You just died and your main concern is for your family. That's good stuff right there. You looked at me with fascination. To you, I didn't look like God. I just looked like some man or possibly a woman. Some vague authority figure, maybe. Don't worry, I said. They'll be fine. Your kids will remember you as perfect in every way. They didn't have time to grow contemptuous of you. Your wife will cry on the outside, but will be secretly relieved. To be fair, your marriage was falling apart. If it's any consolation, she'll feel very guilty for feeling relieved. Oh, so what happens now? Do I go to heaven or hell or something? Neither. You'll be reincarnated. Ah. So the Hindus were right. All religions are right in their own way. Walk with me. You followed along as we strode through the void. Where are we going? Nowhere in particular. It's just nice to walk while we talk. So, what's the point then? When I get reborn, I'll just be a blank slate, right? A baby. So, all my experiences and everything I did in this life won't matter. Not so. You have within you all the knowledge and experiences of all your past lives. You just don't remember them right now. I stopped walking and took you by the shoulders. Your soul is more magnificent, beautiful, and gigantic than you can possibly imagine. A human mind can only contain a tiny fraction of what you are. It's like sticking your finger in a glass of water to see if it's hot or cold. You put a tiny part of yourself into the vessel, and when you bring it back out, you've gained all the experiences it had. You've been in a human for the last 48 years, so you haven't stretched out yet and felt the rest of your immense consciousness. If we hung out here for long enough, you'd start remembering everything. But there's no point to doing that between each life. How many times have I been reincarnated then? Oh, lots. Lots and lots. And into lots of different lives. This time around, you'll be a Chinese peasant girl in 540 AD. Wait, what? You're sending me back in time? Well, I guess technically, time as you know it only exists in your universe. Things are different where I come from. Where you come from? Oh, sure. I come from somewhere else. And there are others like me. I know you'll want to know what it's like there, but honestly, you wouldn't understand. Oh, you said, a little let down. But wait, if I get reincarnated to other places in time, I could have interacted with myself at some point. Sure, happens all the time. And with both lives only aware of their own lifespan, you don't even know it's happening. So, what's the point of it all? I looked you in the eye. The meaning of life, the reason I made this whole universe, is for you to mature. You mean mankind? You want us to mature? No, just you. I made this whole universe for you. With each new life, you grow and mature and become a larger and greater intellect. Just me? What about everyone else? There is no one else. In this universe, there's just you and me. You stared blankly at me. But all the people on Earth, all you, different incarnations of you. Wait, I'm everyone? Now you're getting it. I'm every human being who ever lived. Or who will ever live, yes. I'm Abraham Lincoln. And you're John Wilkes Booth too. I'm Hitler, you said, appalled. And you're the millions he killed. I'm Jesus. And you're everyone who followed him. You fell silent. Every time you victimized someone, you were victimizing yourself. Every act of kindness you've done to yourself. Every happy and sad moment ever experienced by any human was or will be experienced by you. You thought for a long time. Why? Why do all this? Because someday you will become like me. Because that's what you are. You're one of my kind. You're my child. Wow, you said, incredulous. You mean I'm a god? No, not yet. You're a fetus. You're still growing. Once you've lived every human life throughout all time, you will have grown enough to be born. So the whole universe, it's just an egg, I answered. Now it's time for you to move on to your next life. And I sent you on your way.
The notion of ethico-ontoepistemology was first coined by feminist physicist philosopher Karen Barad to point at the inseparability of ethics, ontology, and epistemology when engaging in scientific knowledge production. With scientific practices and with the world itself and its inhabitants, human and not non-human beings that interactively co-constitute the world. Inspired by Jacques Derrida and Emmanuel Levinas, and also firmly rooted in Donna Haraway's feminist science study tradition that emphasizes the need of accountable and just knowledge production, the idea that one cannot but ethically engage with the world has a central place in Barad's new feminist materialist theory of agential realism. Barad's ethico-ontoepistemology itself can in fact be regarded as a quantum entanglement that demonstrates that because we are part of the world, we can no longer see ourselves as innocent bystanders observing the world from a freestanding perspective, or as feminist science studies scholar Donna Haraway has called such a falsely neutral, overarching point, a view, a God trick. Haraway rejected and believed that there was no God trick of seeing everything from nowhere. We are always reading the world from somewhere.
Pushed, kind of bent. Ontology concerns the philosophy of existence and the assumptions and beliefs that we hold about the nature of being and existence. Epistemology is the theory of knowledge and the assumptions and beliefs that we have about the nature of knowledge. How do we know the world? What is the relationship between the inquirer and the known? Methodology, how we gain knowledge about the world, or an articulated, theoretically informed approach to the production of data. Paradigms, models or frameworks that are derived from a worldview or belief system about the nature of knowledge and existence. Paradigms are shared by a scientific community and guide how a community of researchers act with regard to inquiry.
Patty Lather and Betty St. Pierre identified 5 paradigms for inquiry. Those categories are based on goals of inquiry. Those are to predict,
to figure out whether this curriculum is effective or not,
to understand,
to understand the life of teachers in the classroom,
to emancipate,
to enhance science learning among English language learners,
to deconstruct,
to deconstruct the structure in which sex education is neglected,
and what they call the next.
To define a new world in which assessments have more agency than students do.
Auguste Comte proposed positivism in the 19th century. According to him, true knowledge is based on experience of senses and can be obtained by observation and experiment. Positivistic thinkers adopt his scientific method as a means of knowledge generation. Hence, it has to be understood within the framework of the principles and assumptions of science. These assumptions are determinism, empiricism, parsimony, and generality. In interpretivism and social constructionism, that are often dated from Peter Berger and Thomas Luckmann's book, The Social Construction of Reality, the researcher emphasizes that social reality is viewed and interpreted by the individual herself, according to the ideological positions she possesses. Therefore, knowledge is personally experienced rather than acquired from or imposed from outside. The critical paradigm grew from the Frankfurt School and the social movements of the 1960s and 1970s. Marx wrote, "Why should we be content to understand the world instead of trying to change it?" Indeed, interpretation by critical social scientists describing lived experience is necessary but not enough. Critical social scientists are ethically committed to identify, expose, and overturn structures of oppression that lead to false consciousness and hegemony in which people contribute to their own oppression. Thus, emancipation from social injustice is the goal of the critical social sciences. In the post-theories, all major epistemological, ontological, and methodological concepts such as language, discourse, knowledge, truth, reason, power, freedom, the subject, objectivity, being, reality, method, science, are deconstructed. The post-paradigms from the critiques following the Second World War include those of Michel Foucault, Jacques Derrida, and Gilles Deleuze. Paradigm shifts occur as reaction formations to the perceived inadequate explanatory power of existing paradigms. In post-paradigm, as Foucault said, in the order of things, human and human's voice is not the center of the inquiry. I tried to explore scientific discourse not only from the point of view of the individuals who are speaking, nor from the point of view of the formal structures of what they are saying, but from the point of view of the rules that come into play in the very existence of such discourse. What conditions did Linnaeus or Petty or Arnaud have to fulfill, not to make his discourse coherent and true in general, but to give it, at the time when it was written and accepted, value and practical application as scientific discourse?
Post-structural theories incited a new epistemological turn, as explained in column 4 by Lather and St. Pierre. All major ideas have been deconstructed. And now in the 5th column, we have the next which is an ontological term. At the intersection of feminisms and post-structural philosophies, new ontologies such as new materialism, new feminism, agential realism, post-humanism, slow science, flattened ontology started to come to being. This ontological turn is an end to incrementalism, the idea that knowledge steadily accumulates as an epistemological feature. The accumulation of knowledge in science meant one bit of knowledge builds on another and then another, correcting error along the way until there is a solid body of scientific truth. Thomas Kuhn's work showed that what was claimed to be scientific truth in one paradigm at one historical moment will no longer be true after a paradigm shift. Therefore, the normal science in each discipline and each paradigm is insufficient to address the problems that we are facing. The recent history of the planet has thrown up multiple reminders that modernist dualist logic has outlived its usefulness in making sense of life in the 21st century. This has made it increasingly difficult to ignore the presence of entities around us that resist being categorized under any dualist ontology. COVID-19 and environmental crisis, among others, have been identified as dualism-busting assemblages of the capitalist scene.